The strange thing about destiny is that sometimes the people meant to change your life are waking up in another part of the world, praying the same prayers you are. They just don't know it yet. Rain pressed softly against the tall glass windows of the downtown counseling center as Elena Reed adjusted the sleeve of her beige coat and glanced at the clock on the wall. 7:42 p.m. Most of the staff had already gone home, but room 4 was still occupied. The faint sound of a woman crying leaked through the partially opened office door, while Elena sat quietly across from her, hands folded loosely on her lap. "You don't have to pretend you're okay in here," Elena said gently. The woman wiped her face quickly. "I just feel stupid." "You're not stupid." A shaky laugh escaped the woman's lips. "That's easy for you to say. You seem like someone who has everything together." Elena smiled softly, but it didn't fully reach her eyes. "If only you knew." Outside the office, thunder rumbled faintly across the city skyline. The scent of coffee and old paper lingered in the warm room, while soft instrumental music played from a speaker near the bookshelf. The woman inhaled deeply before speaking again. "How do you trust people after they hurt you?" For a brief second, Elena froze. Not outwardly, only internally, like someone had quietly pressed against an old bruise. Images flickered through her mind too quickly to fully form. Her mother crying silently in the kitchen. Her father sleeping in the guest room for months. Doors closing softly instead of slamming. The unbearable silence that followed their divorce. Elena pushed the memories down carefully. "You learn slowly," she answered, "and sometimes you heal in layers." The woman nodded, emotional again. Elena handed her a tissue box with calm, practiced gentleness. She had become good at this over the years, carrying steady calm for other people even when her own heart felt tired. That was the irony of her life. People came to her for comfort constantly, but very few noticed how lonely she was when the rooms became quiet again. Nearly an hour later, Elena finally stepped out of the building into the cold evening air. New York buzzed around her in restless motion, taxi lights reflecting against wet pavement, distant sirens, strangers brushing past each other beneath umbrellas. Her phone vibrated in her coat pocket. MIA calling. Elena hesitated before answering. "Hey!" Her younger sister's voice came sharp and distracted over the line. "Mom called me again." Elena closed her eyes briefly. Of course she did. And I didn't answer. A taxi splashed through a puddle nearby. "Mia." "No, Elena, I'm serious. I can't do this tonight." There was tension underneath her voice. Exhaustion, too. Elena leaned against the building carefully. "She's still your mother." A bitter laugh came through the speaker. "That's easy for you to say. You're always fixing everybody." Elena's jaw tightened slightly. "I'm not fixing anybody." "Really? Because that's what you've been doing since Dad left." Silence. The words landed harder than Mia probably intended. People passed around Elena while cold wind brushed strands of dark hair across her face. Finally, she spoke quietly. "She's having a hard time. We all are." Another silence. Then Mia exhaled sharply. "I have to go." The line disconnected before Elena could answer. She lowered the phone slowly. Across the street, a couple laughed together beneath the awning of a small restaurant, leaning into each other naturally like they belonged there. Something inside Elena tightened unexpectedly. Not jealousy exactly, just grief she didn't always know how to name. She looked away quickly and started walking. Her apartment was quiet when she got home. Too quiet. The soft hum of the heater filled the space while city lights glowed faintly through the windows. Elena dropped her keys into a ceramic bowl near the entrance and kicked off her heels slowly. She should eat. She should shower. She should answer emails. Instead, she stood in the kitchen staring blankly at the untouched groceries on the counter. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her younger brother, Caleb. She answered immediately. "Hey, can you send me Mom's insurance information?" he asked flatly. No greeting, no warmth. "Hi to you too," Elena replied lightly, trying to soften the mood. Caleb ignored it. "I'm serious, the hospital called earlier." Concern flashed across her face instantly. "Hospital?" "She's fine," he muttered, "just stress-related." Elena pressed a hand against the counter. "Why didn't anyone call me?" "You're busy." The words weren't cruel, but they still hurt. "I would have come." Another pause. Then Caleb sighed quietly. I know. For a moment, the tension between them softened just slightly, but only slightly. I'll text the information, Elena said. Thanks. Before hanging up, Caleb added quietly, You can't keep carrying everybody, Elena. Then the call ended. Elena stood there staring at the dark screen in silence. The apartment suddenly felt colder. She walked slowly toward the living room and sank onto the couch, exhaustion settling into her bones. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows again. For a long moment, she simply sat there, still, tired, alone. Then quietly, almost like she was afraid to say it aloud, she whispered into the empty apartment, God, am I always going to feel this way? The room remained silent, but somehow, deep beneath the ache in her chest, there was still a small, stubborn part of her that believed he was listening. Even here, even now. Thousands of miles away, sunlight spilled across the large dining table inside the Vale family home. Mom, if you put any more food on this table, we'll need a second house. Adrian smiled as his younger brother Lucas reached for another piece of toast. Oh, please, their mother replied, waving him off. You boys eat like wolves whenever you visit. Warm laughter filled the kitchen. The room smelled like fresh coffee, cinnamon, and baked bread, while soft jazz played quietly from a speaker near the counter. Morning light poured through wide windows overlooking the lake beyond the backyard. Adrian leaned back in his chair, watching his family move around each other with familiar ease. His father reading headlines from his tablet, his mother pretending not to notice Lucas stealing fruit, his older sister Naomi laughing while helping her daughter clean spilled juice. It was noisy, comfortable, safe, the kind of home people spent years trying to build. You're quiet today, Naomi observed suddenly. Adrian glanced up. Am I? Yes, his mother answered immediately. Very. Lucas smirked. He's thinking about proposing. Their mother's face brightened instantly. Finally. Adrian laughed under his breath, rubbing the back of his neck. We're still discussing things. That's not what you said last month, Naomi teased. Before Adrian could respond, his phone lit up beside his plate. Sophia. His expression softened automatically. Speak of the angel, Lucas muttered dramatically. Adrian shook his head and answered the call. Hey! Sophia's voice came warm and polished through the speaker. Did I interrupt breakfast? You know my family doesn't believe in privacy. Laughter echoed around the table. Tell your mother I said hello. She heard you? His mother waved enthusiastically toward the phone anyway. Sophia chuckled softly. I'll see you tonight? Adrian glanced toward the window absent-mindedly. Yeah, dinner at 7, right? Don't sound too excited. His smile faded slightly, only for a second. But Naomi noticed. Sorry, Adrian said quickly. Long week. Sophia's tone gentled. Get some rest before tonight, okay? I will. After the call ended, the conversation around the table resumed naturally. But Adrian remained quieter than before. His father studied him briefly from across the table without speaking. Adrian reached for his coffee slowly. Everything in his life looked right. The relationship, the career, the future, the timing. So why did peace still feel strangely absent? He hated that question. Because Sophia was good, truly good, kind, thoughtful, faithful. Anyone would be lucky to marry her, including him, which made the quiet unrest inside him even harder to explain. His mother was speaking again, but Adrian barely heard her. Somewhere deep down, beneath logic and appearances and carefully arranged plans, something still wasn't settled, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't silence it. The first time Elena realized something was wrong in her family, she was 13 years old. Not because her parents shouted, that would have been easier to understand. It was the silence that frightened her, the kind that stretched across dinner tables and followed people down hallways, the kind that made children whisper without knowing why. Rain tapped softly against the windows of their old family home, while teenage Elena sat cross-legged on the staircase, holding a textbook she had stopped reading 20 minutes ago. Downstairs, her mother stood at the kitchen counter, washing dishes that were already clean. Her father leaned against the doorway with his sleeves rolled halfway up his arms. We can't keep pretending this is working, he said quietly. Her mother didn't turn around. For once, can we not do this in front of the kids? They're not stupid, Claire. The sound of a plate hitting the sink too hard echoed through the kitchen. Upstairs, Elena held her breath. From the living room, 10-year-old Caleb sat on the carpet pretending to play video games, though his eyes kept drifting toward the kitchen. Little Mia appeared beside Elena on the stairs, clutching a blanket. "Are they fighting again?" she whispered. Elena forced a small smile quickly. "No. Go back to bed." But Mia didn't move. Neither did Elena, because deep down, both of them already knew something was changing. Months later, the divorce papers arrived quietly. No dramatic explosion, no screaming, just signatures, boxes, and a father who suddenly stopped living in the house. Elena still remembered the morning he left. Cold winter air drifted through the open doorway, while Caleb stood stiffly near the hallway wall, refusing to look at anyone. Their father knelt slightly in front of him. "Buddy!" Caleb stepped back instantly. "I'm fine." But he wasn't. Even at 12, the anger in his eyes looked too heavy for a child. Their father's expression broke slightly before he turned toward Mia. She cried immediately when he hugged her. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" she asked through tears. The hesitation that followed hurt more than words. Elena noticed it. So did Mia. Their mother stood near the kitchen entrance, arms folded tightly across herself like she was physically trying not to fall apart. And Elena? Elena stood there silently holding everyone together with her eyes while something cracked quietly inside her too. Years later, the damage still lived in different forms inside each of them. Caleb became distant. Phone calls felt rushed. Visits became rare. Every conversation carried irritation underneath it. Mia became quieter instead. Harder to read, harder to reach. And Elena became the bridge. The peacemaker. The responsible one. The person everyone leaned on emotionally without asking whether she was tired too. Which was exactly why family dinner rarely ended well anymore. "You didn't have to invite him." Mia's voice cut through the apartment sharply as she placed her bag on the chair. Elena sighed softly while setting plates on the dining table. "He's your brother. He's impossible." Right on cue, the front door opened. Caleb walked in wearing a dark coat and exhaustion on his face. "Nice to see everyone's already in a good mood." Mia grabbed her glass immediately. "You're late." "I have a job, Mia." "So do other people." Elena closed her eyes briefly. "Not tonight. Please, not tonight." "Can we just eat first?" she asked carefully. But the tension had already settled into the room. Caleb dropped into a chair without another word while Mia stared down at her phone. The sound of cutlery against plates became painfully loud. Elena looked between both of them, her chest tightening quietly. 3 siblings, 1 table, and somehow they had never felt further apart. She tried anyway. "How's work been?" she asked Caleb. "Fine." "Mia?" "Busy." Another dead silence. Elena forced a smile that slowly faded when nobody looked up. For a moment, she suddenly saw a flash of her childhood dining table. Same silence, same tension, same emotional distance sitting between people who loved each other but no longer knew how to show it. Something about that realization made her stomach ache. Later that night, after Caleb left early and Mia disappeared into the guest room without saying goodnight, Elena remained alone in the kitchen, cleaning untouched food into containers. The apartment felt painfully quiet again. She stopped for a moment, gripping the edge of the sink as emotion rose unexpectedly into her throat. No matter how hard she tried, she could never seem to pull everyone back together. Everybody thought Adrian Vale had found the woman he was going to marry, including Adrian himself. And honestly, it made sense. The restaurant overlooked the water, glowing softly beneath hanging lights as conversations and quiet laughter filled the air around them. Sophia sat across from Adrian in a dark green dress, smiling as she tucked loose hair behind her ear. "You're distracted tonight," she said lightly. Adrian blinked back into the moment. "Sorry." She studied him for a second before smiling again. "Work?" "Something like that." A waiter passed carrying plates scented with garlic butter and rosemary, while soft piano music drifted through the room. Sophia reached for her glass. "You know, my mother asked me yesterday if I should start looking at wedding venues." Adrian laughed softly under his breath. "Already? She's optimistic." "She's terrifying." Sophia smiled wider at that. And the strange thing was, being with her really was easy. She was thoughtful, patient, beautiful without trying too hard, the kind of woman people naturally respected. Even his family loved her, especially his mother. You know, Sophia continued carefully, if you're getting nervous, you can say that. Nervous about what? She gave him a look. Adrian smiled faintly but didn't answer, because deep down, something inside him tightened again. That feeling, the quiet unrest he couldn't explain, and he hated himself for it, because there was nothing wrong with her. Nothing. A few days later, Adrian stood inside a luxury jewelry store while the sales consultant carefully placed a velvet box in front of him. There it is, she said warmly. Custom finished this morning. The diamond caught the overhead light instantly. Clean, elegant, timeless, exactly the kind Sophia would love. The consultant smiled knowingly. She's going to say yes. Adrian looked at the ring silently. His chest should have felt excited. Instead, it felt heavy, not fear, not panic, just resistance he couldn't explain. Still, he nodded politely and reached for the box. I'll take it. That night, his friends wouldn't stop talking about the proposal. You finally joining the Married Men Club? Marcus joked as they walked out of a basketball gym. Adrian shook his head with a laugh. Relax. No, seriously, another friend added. Sophia's perfect for you. Yeah, Marcus agreed. Calm, classy, mature. You'd be crazy not to lock that down. Adrian forced a smile. Crazy. Maybe that was the problem. Because logically, everyone was right. So why did peace still feel missing? Later that evening, Adrian sat alone in his apartment, staring at the small velvet ring box resting on the kitchen counter. The city lights outside painted faint reflections across the dark windows, while rain tapped softly against the glass. He rubbed his jaw slowly, tired, restless. His phone buzzed again, a message from Sophia. Mom keeps asking if something special is happening next week. Should I be suspicious? A smile pulled briefly at his lips, then disappeared. Adrian typed, maybe. 3 dots appeared immediately. Sophia. That sounded terrifying. He chuckled softly and locked the phone. Silence filled the apartment again. The ring sat there between him and the dim kitchen light like a question he couldn't answer. Finally, Adrian stood and walked toward the balcony. Cold air brushed against his skin as he stepped outside. The city stretched endlessly beneath him. Headlights, distant sirens, glowing windows carrying thousands of lives moving at once. Normally, prayer came naturally to him, but lately, even that felt difficult. Not because he doubted God, but because he feared what the answer might be. He rested both hands against the balcony railing and closed his eyes. God. The words came out strained. If this is right, why does it feel so wrong inside me? The wind moved quietly around him. No answer, only the growing weight in his chest. That night, sleep barely came. Adrian tossed onto his side again, frustration building as the red numbers on the clock shifted past 2:17 a.m. Then 3:04, then 3:46. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind returned to the same thoughts. Sophia smiling at dinner, his mother excitedly mentioning grandchildren, the ring hidden inside his drawer, and underneath all of it, that unsettling lack of peace. By morning, exhaustion sat heavily beneath his eyes. Even his mother noticed immediately during breakfast later that weekend. You're not sleeping, she said gently. Adrian looked up from his coffee. I'm fine. His father glanced at him briefly over the newspaper. That look lingered slightly too long, like he knew something Adrian hadn't said yet. And suddenly, for the first time in weeks, Adrian felt the terrifying realization settle quietly into his chest. What if this wasn't cold feet? What if something deeper was wrong? And if it was, how do you walk away from a good person without breaking both your hearts? Sometimes the hardest relationships to leave are not toxic ones, but the ones that look perfect even to everyone else. What if peace is the one thing Adrian can't afford to ignore? Sometimes the real battle isn't choosing between good and bad, but between what looks right and what truly is. What if walking away from a good relationship ends up changing everything? And for the first time in Adrian's life, he's about to discover that love alone may not be enough, that peace matters more than appearances. Part 2 changes everything. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more emotional faith-based stories about love, healing, destiny, and God's timing. And tell me in the comments, Do you think Adrian should ignore his feelings and go ahead with the proposal? Or listen to the lack of peace inside him?